just a little bit about myself. I'm an instructional designer and a course developer for the National Film Board of Canada. And this is the course that we've been working on. So just want to double check quickly that everyone can see my screen. It should be the NFB website here. Yeah?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. So if you're a campus subscriber and you're logged in, there's going to be this awesome new tab called Workshops. So let's click on that and see where it takes us. So I'm just going to tap that. And here we have this new workshop that's featured, and it's called Digital Storytelling. So all you have to do to get started is click on this button. And right now it's going to prompt me to create a class. So I'm going to call this Brian's Summer Class. Let's do that. And then I'm going to press Create. So now we're on the workshop stage. And essentially we have this digital storytelling course where I have the class that I just created. So it's the name of my class. I can click on this to actually go inside the module. So we'll do that in a sec. I can click on this button too that will do the same thing. I also have the date the class was created and this access code. So let's say I'm a teacher in front of the class and I have my screen on the smartboard and I'm exactly where I am here. I can just press this button, and then basically there's this URL. So students would follow this URL and then put in this access code, and they would have access to the entire course. Let's say you wanted to create another class. So maybe you have more than one class where you'd like to use this, then you can just simply create another class. I'm just going to call this class 2 here quickly for the sake of the example. And there would be a separate access code for this for students to join that class. So just to be clear, you don't need a code per student. This is good for like 40 students. So if you have a class of 40 students and you give them this URL, all they have to do is put in the code and they will have access. A quick note here, right now I'm on nfb.ca and I'm in English. So if you were to switch to French and you create a class, then it will automatically create a course that is where all the content is in French. So I just wanted to say a quick note about that. And before we hop into quickly, I just want to mention, because I really want to get into the content and focus on the actual activities and the videos, but there is this option here for teacher guides. So I'm just going to click on that. You would have a download that would pop up at the bottom. And here you have access to teacher guides. And this is an amazing wealth of information on the actual entire course. So there's a course outline. And in here, there's all kinds of information. I'll just zoom in quickly about the different modules. We talk about the objectives. So for example, module 2, which is choosing a topic, we explore the ideation process and define the criteria for choosing a good topic. The targeted subject matters, English, social science, arts, education, and the time it takes to complete different sections. So on top of that too, there's also guides, a general guide, which gives information. It's really detailed. So it has information that ranges from, the materials and technical requirements. There aren't really that many. It's just that you need a computer and a web connection. And it goes into anything that you might want to know about, pedagogical approach, about the workshop, and so on. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that kind of thing, but I just wanted everyone to be aware that all this content exists, and there's likely a lot of information there for if you have questions. There's probably a lot of the answers in here. Okay, boring.
So Brian, just to recap, if
Yeah.
you're a teacher and you log into the campus platform, you see workshops as a teacher, right?
Yes, absolutely. So that's, that's this tab right here. And that's going to take you exactly to this space. If you haven't created a class, it'll prompt you to create a class like I just showed before. But yeah, if you're a teacher and you have campus, all you do is log in and this will be available. So this course is actually live right now. You have access to everything I'm about to show. So I'm just going to jump into the class. So here we are, Media School. This is the digital storytelling course. And essentially, filmmaker Paul Tom will be the mentor through the digital storytelling production process, from the stages of ideation and writing right through the editing and copyright compliance. So there's a video that explains a little bit about the course, but I'm kind of doing that right now, so I'm just going to skip that. And then we have 11 modules. So I'm going to go through, the idea today is really just to go through module 1 with you and then show you a few other activities. But just to give you a sense of what's included in this course, we have a module on explaining what a digital story is. And like I said, we're going to go into that. We have a module on choosing a topic, and we also provide space here for teachers to put in criteria for their projects as well. So if you're doing something in class that has specific criteria that you want to include, we have a space for that so that it can be written in, and then students can look at that when they're coming up with their topic. We have a module on research that gets into the primary and secondary sources. We even have a interactive activity that gets students to analyze whether an article is fake or real news. So in today's day and age, with the amount of misinformation, we felt that it was super important to include that to understand, is this article real or fake? And then there's a research template. So each module has an action. So there's essentially activities and videos that practice concepts. And then there's an action which gets students to work on their own digital story. So the action for the research module is to complete their research using a template that we've created. And module 4, students are going to be looking at the digital story proposal, which is it's a space for them to create or to share what they've done so far with their peers. So, what topic did they do? Some of the research, maybe some ideas for images, music, and sound effects. They would do that in the digital story proposal. Then we have original angle and narrative structure. In 6, they're writing the narration. And this also includes a template for writing the narration, and we'll look at that a little bit more. We also have clips from the NFB that talk to students about the different types of narrators and tenses. And then moving right on to module 7, image rights, copyright, and online ethics. So this module 2, this gets into everything about, the release forms that you might need if you're going on a photo shoot, but it also talks about what to do when you're getting images online. How can you follow copyright rules? If you're using Creative Commons licenses, for example, attribution, share alike, it's all explained in here. And what I want to mention about this too is that you might be looking at, or you might be listening to me explain some of this and say, I don't necessarily want to do the art of editing or creating photos, but it does interest me to do image rights and copyright. Well, nothing is lost. So if that interests you, then you can just hop right into this module and take a look at the content there as well. Module 8 is another example of a module that stands really well on its own. This is a photography class in and of itself. So creating photos and videos. Here we get into photographic composition. We teach students about different camera parameters, shutter speed, ISO, aperture, and we even have an interactive activity that I'm going to show you, where students can actually practice taking a photo by changing settings, and they don't even have to have a camera. So it's really cool. We'll take a look at that in a bit. Module 9 is about the art of editing. So Paul talks about the different elements included in a digital story, so music, sound effects, pictures, and how to put those together to create a compelling story. And then finally in module 10 and 11, which are a little bit different than the others because they're only video based, we get into editing techniques. So this is not an editing software, but we teach the basics of how to edit. So we explain, how to put music with images and how to cut your narration to make it fit with the pictures, how to do basic cuts and trims and that sort of thing, anything that you would expect in editing a video. And then finally, it's the publication, so to publish the work. So it's really the whole process from A to Z of creating a digital story. So let's hop into module 1. What is a digital story? So each module, you'll see that there's this menu on the side, which includes all the activities and videos that are in the module. So I actually just want to go through this, so let's do it together. Let me know if the sound is working. So I'm just going to play the first video. This is the introduction.
Module 1. What is a digital story? Telling a digital story consists in making a video based on images you combine with narration and sound effects. It's also a way to express your creativity, give your point of view, and speak out. But about what? First, you have to decide what you want to say. There are many types of stories you can tell. You can choose to paint a portrait of someone, or even yourself. You can depict a culture or a place that inspires you. You can relate an event, support a cause, or share an experience. You express your feelings and opinions through the work you create. But how can you make it a good story? How can you take an idea that interests you and transform it into a unique and compelling work? You just have to find a personal approach and then communicate it through a combination of images, words, and sound. That's what I did when I made I Am Here, which tells the story of my family's immigration. It'll help you get to know me and to explore our first big question. What is a digital story and how can it be used? You ready? Let's go.
Okay, so each module starts with an introductory video to give a sense of what's going to be done. And so in this module, it's all about understanding what a digital story is and how it can be used. So the first section, let's start looking at that. Now, the most important part of a digital story is the story types and personal connection. So let's see what that means. Actually, this is a video that explains that, but I'd rather just dive into the activities. So I'm just going to skip that for now. So exploring story types.
The digital story form lets you bring to life the stories you have inside you and share them with others. Discover different story types and what makes them unique.
Okay, so I can click forward here.
Click on the 5 images to discover the main characteristics associated with each type of story.
So here we're presenting some different options that students may use to which stories they can choose. So we have self-portrait, social issue, a portrait, an event, or maybe a transformative experience. So I can just click on this one. So an experience, share an experience that transformed you. So what are the characteristics of this kind of story? So here it's a detailed description of an experience you had, explain how this event affected you and what changed. Why is it important for you to share this experience, and what will others gain from learning about it? Generally, the photos you use should be your own. So right away, we're getting a sense of, if I want to do this kind of story, this is the sort of thing that I would want to include. So it's just a starting point. And students obviously can explore other ones and look at the characteristics that are involved in, for example, a portrait. And this is just a way for them to learn about these different story types. So once that's done and been explored, students can move forward. And already this activity is completed. So let's look now. The next part in this section is viewing examples of digital stories. And you can see here too that now that we've completed this gives us a little check mark saying that we've completed that part.
To help you see some of the possibilities of digital storytelling, watch a few of our productions and get inspired.
So we've created some examples of digital stories. We thought that it was a good way for people to understand what a digital story is to look at a few. So in the instruction here, it says to watch 3 and then move on. So these are basically 9 digital stories that students could have produced. And essentially, they can choose whichever one might interest them. So let's say friendship is everything. This is at the end of the summer, it'll be starting high school. So what is this story about? We can click play. I just want to mention quickly that any of these videos can be put into full screen, but I'm just going to leave it in this mode for now.
My name is Alicia. At the end of the summer, I'll be starting high school. I'm looking forward to it, but I'm a bit stressed too. I know I'll meet all sorts of new kids, but I hope I won't lose the friends I have. Like Emma, Daphne, Simone, Adele, Bethany, and Dylan.
So I'll just pause this. So essentially, we're just getting an idea of what a digital story is. And here we have a question that says, what type of digital story is this? What are the characteristics that motivate your choice? More than one answer is possible. So we just learned about the story types. We still have a tab here that can come out and give students a reminder of what that was. And then we can try to answer the question. So this one, probably a self-portrait. And obviously I could type in more here, but I just want to type in answers so that later when we look at the journal, there's something that's going to pop up. So then when I'm happy with my answer, I can just submit. And you can see here that on this page, then there's a check mark saying I've completed this one. And I can either watch more or just continue. So at this point, I'm just going to move on.
Brian, we have a question about the activities and the videos. Is it are they all available only on the online platform, or are some things available to download if you wanted to do some of the activities in a class and you don't have a good connection?
No, so nothing is available for download as I'm aware yet. I don't think there's a plan for that either, but you don't need that fast of a connection to for this to work.
Okay.
So it should run pretty smoothly. There's one thing that we spent a lot of time on is testing in classrooms, and we've had, I think, upload speeds of like 5 megs and it still worked. So one thing that I would suggest too is that activities are not likely to take up a lot of the space when you're on the internet. It's more the videos. So one option is that if for some reason the internet is really slow, maybe watching the videos, on the smartboard together instead of having it on 20 computers at once is an option. And then the activity should run pretty smoothly on a computer.
Thanks.
Sure. So you can see here that some of these are dimmed out, and that's because we didn't watch any of these, and this is the one that we completed. So I'm just going to click on this one. And here I had written an answer of self-portrait. I obviously could have elaborated on this. So we do this a lot in the digital storytelling course. We have the student's answer and then a feedback. So based on that story, this was a self-portrait. And again, it's self-portrait of Alicia on the brink of starting high school. It's a first-person narration underscoring the importance of friendship. Images are focused on Alicia and is illustrating her day-to-day. So there's just a way for students to get feedback based on the choices that they made. One thing I want to mention, all this information that's written in is kept and stored in a journal over here. That's you can see the option that says see my answers, and we're going to look at that in a second. Okay, so at this point, we've completed the different story types. We've looked at some examples. Now, another important element of a digital story is developing a personal connection.
No matter what type of story you want to create, it's essential to develop a personal connection with your topic. That's what will make your story feel more authentic.
Okay, so
as you think about your personal connection, you don't have to stick to the image content. You can take a few liberties. Focus more on what the image suggests or invokes in you than what it actually represents.
Okay, so here it's asking us to select a photo that could inspire a personal connection and then click on the right arrow to continue. We also have this help option that's here. So if we're not sure what a personal connection is or need a little bit more information on that, we always provide some sort of little tips if needed. I want to mention too that, even though I'm kind of clicking through this and doing this individually, and obviously students could do the same on their computers, it doesn't have to be done that way. There's a lot of different options. So this could be done together as a whole class in front of the, on the whiteboard, or it could also be, given to students in groups. So, each, we could have groups of 6 and have students each take a photo and do it that way. So I'll just pick this photo for now. So describe your personal connection and potential topic, then select the type of story that fits best. Finally, write a short summary of a possible story. So here I would write in a personal connection to this topic. So for me, I mean, after the long winter, one thing I've noticed is all the trash near the river. So I live right by the river, and I've noticed so much trash. And looking at that sign, no Planet B, makes me think about how we definitely need to start working on that. Click the most appropriate story type. And obviously here, I'm going to go through this quickly. So I mean, more time could be spent on it than just that, but yeah, so click on the most appropriate story type. You'll notice that all these are clickable. And while I did mention choosing one story types, it can be about a social issue like the environment, but it can also be an experience too. So you can talk about for example, social issue like, our problems with the environment, but then also relating that to a, personal experience, like just walking outside and seeing a lot of trash on the floor. So here would be a space to write a full summary. So write summary. And I'm just typing in so that we get a response later. And once that's done, I can move forward. And again, we have the feedback. So we bring back the information that was written down. So I have what I wrote down from my personal connection. I have the information that I wrote down from my short summary. And then we have our thoughts. So you generally have a better chance of captivating your audience if your story either has a personal slant, is on a topic you cannot connect with emotionally, shares a firsthand experience, or involves an idea that really fires you up. In short, your personal connection to the topic directly influences how you treat the story and gives it depth. So this image shows young people demonstrating to save the planet. Have you ever been part of a demonstration? Is there any particular issue or cause you feel strongly about? What do you think? Is it important for citizens to take a stand? Questions like these could become your starting point for a story about engagement and activism. So that's essentially our goal here with this activity, is just to start thinking about that personal connection in a way that, in the sense that if it's something that you care about, it's likely going to end up being a better story in the end. So that's it on personal connection. So now we've kind of completed this first section. We've explored the different types of stories. We've looked at some examples of digital stories, and we've practiced creating a personal connection. And then there's this reflection question. So essentially, we have videos and activities, which practice the concepts. And then finally, we have these reflection questions, and later at the end of the module, an action, which gets students to think about their own digital story. So here it's taking it back to the students. So think about your story. What type of story would you like to use in your project and why? Do you have any kind of personal connection to the topic that could help bring your story to life? So we've added a button here in case it's needed for review to review the story types. And we have that information if students need to think about it again. And then they can type in an answer here. Is there anything else you would like to add to your learning? So I'm just going to type something in here. And this is just a space, like if they have ideas based on the activities that they did that they want to add and they want it to go into notes so that it's preserved. So let's just take a look at how that works. We've done section 1 now. So I'm just going to click on, finish this. And then I'm going to click on see my answers. So you'll notice we have learning notes here. There's a button option here to export all the learning notes. So let's say you've completed the whole module and you want everything in one Word document, you can click on that button. And down here we have module 1, what is a digital story? And you'll see that we only completed section 1 and these 3 activities. So the notes, it's only activities that are completed. So if students have written something in, then it shows up. So it's sort of like this journal is being built slowly. So in viewing examples of digital story, we had friendship is everything. That's the story we looked at. And I said it was a self-portrait. I wrote my answer in there. And so I can either copy this answer or export it. So if I want to export this, I can click on the button and then it creates a Word file. I'm just going to open this to show you real quick. So it brings the title of the module, the section, and it shows the question that was asked as well as the answer. So all that information can be stored. That's what I'm trying to show here. So it can be exported. Students can export the actual answer for one question. They can export the whole section itself, or they can export the entire module itself. And
Brian, just a little question. Obviously, once they export it as a Word file, they could edit it, but can they go back to review the answer that they wrote?
Good question. So if I'm here and I see friendship is everything, and I wrote this answer, I'm like, you know what? That really wasn't a detailed answer. I'm going to go work on that again. So if I click here, you'll see there's a button option here that says go to lesson. So if I click on that, I'm right back in viewing examples of digital stories.
To help you,
I'll just skip ahead here. And then if I go into friendship is everything, I can change my answer. So this is not the answer. I want blah. So now I've changed my answer and I submit. And if I go back to see my answers under section 1 and viewing examples of digital story, you can see that it's been updated here as well.
Great.
Yeah. So I'm just going to hop back into the module and let's just continue. So this is the first section completed. So we know what the different types of stories, we've viewed examples, we've made a personal connection, we've thought about our own digital story as well a little bit. So there's a video here about creating a quick story. So now what we figured is like, what's the best way to tell everybody or tell students what a digital story is? Well, let's get them to make one really fast.
to give you a good idea of what a digital story is, take the challenge proposed here. This will allow you to better understand its components and discover how you can combine them into your own unique work.
All right. So mini story. What type of story will you tell? Click on. So these are familiar because we looked at this in section 1. So social issues, self-portrait. Let's go with portrait. So that's the kind of story I'd like to create here, and I'll move forward. So the next step is to select some photos. So I'm going to choose 5 photos that make sense. I can click on this to make the photo bigger and get a sense of what's going on in the picture. So maybe this picture, this one. Let's go with this, this, and this. Okay, now let's give them some kind of order. So if this is the start and this is the finish, maybe we're starting here, or actually not that. Let's go with this. So students basically place the photos that they selected and they give them an order. Now we got to add some music. So let's listen to some options. Okay, I'm really not the jazzy kind, so I'm going to go with the first one. I'll select that one and I can see that it's selected here, so I'll go with that. And lastly, we need to write a narration for each image. So here on this page, it says write a brief narration for the first image of your story. I was choosing a portrait, so I'm just going to type something in for now, but essentially this is where the students would write a narration. The text will serve to connect the photos. Each text should take no more than 5 seconds to read and should not repeat what is on screen. So it's just some advice there. So photo 1. And the photos are coming in, obviously, in the order that we had read selections before. So I'm just going to put in B, C, B, B. And next, what we're going to do is view this story. So I don't think it's an Oscar winner with the 5 first letters of the alphabet. But the idea here is basically just have students go through creating a digital story the fastest way possible in an interactive way to get a sense of really what it is. So they can replay the project if they want to, or they can just move on. So we've done now the mini story challenge. Let's move on to section 3. So section 3 is all about inspiration. Tom talks, I don't want to play the entire video, but Paul talks about his inspiration for I Am Here. And then he actually created his digital story called I Am Here. And I'd like to share this one a little bit. So let's press play.
I was born on January 21st, 1984. On that day, these men were the leaders of the world. These men and this woman. That evening, in most Canadian homes, people were watching hockey. If they didn't like hockey, they had lots of other choices. On January 21st, 1984, fashion looked like this. Cars looked like these. People still talked on this. And this was a computer. On January 21st, 1984, I was still far from being part of that world. Here's what my world looked like. This is the refugee camp in Thailand where I was born. My parents had fled the civil war in Cambodia and lived in various camps for the next 4 years. We received a favorable response from Quebec, and so boarded a plane for Montreal in the fall of 1985. On December 4th, 1985, the wife of an Olympic champion gave birth. My sister was born that same evening. She thus became our family's first Canadian citizen. On February 3rd,
so we're just going to pause it there. I don't want to play the whole thing because I want to make sure that we have enough time to go through it, but you can watch obviously on your own time too, Paul's entire story. So this is his story that he created, and he uses this story as an example as we go through this creating a digital story. So we draw examples from this one right here. So the next activity is playing with digital story elements. And here it focuses essentially on some of the elements that Paul used in his story.
Dig deeper to better understand the relationships between the various elements of my digital story.
So it asks us, select the 6 elements that are the most often used in Paul's digital story. So obviously if we had seen the whole thing, we would know that, nope, there were not long texts. Yeah, there were some sound effects, photos, narration, videos, music, special effects, not really, and definitely some short text. So essentially these are the main elements of the digital story. And we always give a little bit of feedback, but I'm just going to skip through this quickly. And now we have this quiz that's basically asking questions about the digital story and getting into some details about Paul's choices. So this first one's about the length. So how long is the digital story? Usually it is less than 5 minutes. And that's correct. It says here that Paul's was 4. And then we have some other quiz type questions. So of the story types, transformative experience, social issue, event, portrait, self-portrait, which does Paul use in the demo project? And there might be more than one. So students can obviously type in their answer here if they want to, and then submit. So it's trying to take back some of the information that they learned previously as well to help get the answer. And we always have these nice feedbacks too that really help learn more about this digital story. So the reality is that is that any one story will usually involve multiple story types. Mixing genres like Paul does in I Am Here also helps vary the tone and pacing, which is what makes the story really jump off the page. So I'm not going to go through all the questions, but essentially this quiz deconstructs I Am Here by looking at audio elements, looking at sound effects, what do they bring to the story, and it's getting students to really think about these individual elements and what their contribution is to a visual story. So I'm not going to finish the rest of it. I'm just going to skip ahead. And now that we've seen this section on inspiration, there's a reflection question. So here it's about students' own story. Which aspects of the digital storytelling are the most important to keep in mind? Did Paul's story have any takeaways that could be applied to your own? So maybe they've seen something in Paul's story, they're like, hey, that was really cool. I want to type that in here and add that to my story. Is there anything else you'd like to add to your learning notes? This is an option to be able to include that there as well. Finally, the last section of a module, and you can expect to see this structure in every module. So there's the sections, there's the videos, there's the activities, and there's these reflection questions and action, which are essentially a way of working on the actual digital story. So in the action, watch inspiring digital stories. There's a video explaining the action, but I'm not going to play that one. And then there's the action itself. So the action in this case is to actually just watch an inspiring visual story. So here we usually provide an instruction, which students can read. And then here are examples from the NFB's collection. So we've carefully gone through some of the NFB's collection to find some perfect examples of digital stories. I want to share one with you that I really like. This one's called A Short History of the High Rise Part 3 Glass. So let's check that out together. And this is about how has the proliferation of luxury condos impacted the widening gap between rich and poor. To find out, watch Glass, a film created using archival materials from the New York Times. All right, let's check that out.
You don't need trend spotters to tell you, because it's not hard to see, that our world cities have mainly one way to grow, and that's vertically. For a century, high-rises were made of concrete and steel. Now urban jungles are made of glass, but what do they conceal? By the 1990s, the spirit of public housing had turned into a ghost, and the commodified glass condo rose as the new observation post. All over Asia, pop-up cities, megacities, and super cities increase in relevance, while next-gen slum clearance sweeps the developing world's informal settlements. Urban slums, once seen as worthless, are now eyed with speculation. The rich return downtown and push the poor out into peripheral high-rises, a new form of deportation. In New York, even old concrete blocks are the target of speculators requiring only a bank's persuasion. A famous fight happened like this in the building where hip-hop was invented. The tenants fought off speculators' attempts to have gentrification augmented, forgetting all the signs as the middle class declines, that most of the new vertical urban future aligns. Only for the very rich or the very poor, the city ceases to be accessible to all. The new luxury high-rise places are getting smarter, greener, taller, while the new low-rent trend downtown is to make the units smaller and smaller and smaller. Some critics say these micro-apartments of less than 300 square feet are another way of confining the young, the lonely, the cash poor into prison cell-like retreat. Remember the tenements? This rampant privatized vertical development in the future, when it comes, such buildings made of glass, a material that hardly lasts, might well too turn into slums. Not all innovative vertical communities are designed from the top down. A vertical squat in Caracas has all the social features of a functioning small town.
So I'll just pause this one here. it wasn't that much longer, just it's a 4-minute clip. So we really wanted to show some perfect examples from the NFB's collection of digital stories that's essentially using images to tell a story with, a narration over the top. So after they've looked at a video, there's a quiz now that's going to get them to think about what they just saw. So based on the digital story you just watched, answer the following questions. What key elements of a digital story, photographs, narration, short on-screen text, music, sound effects, video clips can be found in this production? Describe how they contribute to the story. So then it's really thinking about, like all those different elements. So, the photographs that are moving slightly, and these movements we show how to do too, like just the skyscrapers kind of moving up and down. You have like sort of the sky in the background that's moving, that sort of thing, to think about the sound. And one of my favorite things about this too was the narration, it's a poem basically. So it was rhyming. So that's an interesting way to be able to tell a story as well. So we basically ask some questions that think about all these things. And we always bring it back to their own story. So what, if anything, have you retained from this story that could help that you could apply to your own? So is there something that you've seen there, whether it's maybe about the fact that it's this social issue, something you weren't aware of that maybe that you want to look at yourself for your own story? So essentially, once students have done that, they've completed module 1. So all that information, again, is found in the notes. And then if students want to, they can go to the next module. So they can use a button down here to go into module 2. But what I'd like to do right now is just show a few other activities that I think that were really cool. So let's look at module 8, creating photos and videos. And as I was mentioning earlier, this is a perfect example of something that can stand on its own, in the sense that it's sort of like a photography class. So I'm going to scroll down here to section 2. Here we have videos about camera settings. We go over understanding aperture, and there's tons of activities in there. Everything about understanding shutter speed, ISO, and then combining the 3 settings. So let's check that out.
To become a really proficient photographer, you have to know how each setting works. That goes without saying. But to take good pictures, you also have to understand and experiment with how they interact with one another. So try to determine what would be the best possible combination of settings for taking this winter scene.
Okay, so here it's asking us if we can get the right exposure. So we have some options down here. So there's a tripod, and we can choose to either turn this on or off. So maybe I'll just keep it off for now. Then we can change the aperture setting. We have a few different options. So I'll choose maybe f16, and then a shutter speed. So we have 1/60th of a second, 1/250th of a second. I'll choose 1/60th, and then an ISO setting. So obviously, you might not know what these mean, but like I said before, we do explain them before. So it's not like this is coming out of nowhere. And then once students are happy with these settings, they can try taking a picture. And you can see that the result is terrible. So with these settings, with the tripod off and an f16 and 1/60th shutter speed, this is the picture that you would get. So you can try reshooting and try to change the parameters to get a different result. So maybe I'd want to turn it with the tripod on. I could choose, and I could keep that setting actually, maybe just increase the shutter speed and leave the ISO where it is and try again. So this result is obviously much better. And if I'm happy with that result, I can save the photo. But obviously students can go back to change a single setting and just see how that affects the photo. And, this is all about understanding how, obviously with the shutter speed here is how much light is being allowed to come into the camera. And they can see that obviously with a much faster shutter speed, then it's going to be a much darker photo. So if I'm happy with this, I can click save.
Did you manage to identify the best settings? As you probably realized, there are many different possible combinations. Here are the 3 best ones. So we've put 3 possible options that we thought were the best, meaning that if you had taken this photo, they could probably be edited in Photoshop, and they wouldn't be either underexposed or overexposed. And then we can see the photo that was taken here with the settings. You can just compare the settings and differences between photos with a proper exposure and not so great exposure. In this case, underexposed. Okay, and I'm just going to go back and just show another activity real quick. Actually, we can stay here for a second. So
part of the videos, like obviously I've been mentioning that Paul is the mentor. There's often these pro tips where Paul talks about his own personal experience as a filmmaker, and he shares that with students throughout the process. So whenever you see a pro tip, that's because it's really Paul providing the information. So maybe we can watch this clip a little bit.
The photographer in action. If my story is going to get people's attention, I need photos that engage them and that tell a story in one or more clicks. Sometimes just one picture says it all. I think this shot here captures the subject. We know right away that this player is eager to get onto the ice. We can see it in her face. Other times, you need a series of pictures to tell the story. To take an example, the shot of the skate in a bag doesn't tell us much by itself. But if it's followed by other photos of hockey equipment, an overall picture develops. We're in a locker room. The girls will be coming in soon. So you have to set the scene for your subject to give viewers an idea of where you're heading. And this is where framing comes in. Framing is choosing. When you frame your shot, you're deciding what to show or not show. You're also choosing how to arrange the elements within the frame so viewers will interpret your picture the way you want. To frame.
So I'll once again just stop the video here, and I'm just going to show one last activity for some interactivity here, jumping into module 5. So one of the things that we want to do in module 5 is about the original angle and narrative structure. And here, so exploring the narrative structure, there's a video, and then there's this activity here, exploring the narrative structure. And I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit.
Before I can, here's the next.
So here's the basic narrative structure that we're using. I think this one should be fairly familiar. We have, the exposition, inciting incident, rising action, climax, falling action, resolution, and then all the elements from Paul's digital story. So, the day of his birth, what life was like on that day, a new point of view regarding his birth, and separated those elements of his digital story into that structure. And we've even created a interactive timeline where Paul explains those different parts interactively.
Click on the black circles to discover the various elements of my story structure. Use the yellow arrows to navigate the timeline.
Okay, so I can go across the timeline. You see we have the different sections at the top here. And for example, if I wanted to check out what Paul was saying about his father's letters, for example, I can click on that.
Some of the connections between my personal history and that of my host society are a little more subtle, but are all based on dates. For my father's letter, I had to be inventive. It's not so much what the letter says that's important, but what it represents, a tangible trace of our previous life. In offering intimate fragments of my family's life, I want to elicit the audience's empathy and get them to care about my story.
Okay, so yeah, and this is just an interesting way for students to sort of learn more about elements that were used in Paul's story and the reasons he used them as it's connected to his narrative structure. So I'm just taking note of the time here, and I want to make sure that there's enough time for questions. So I'm just going to hop back to the digital story front page where we have the rest of the modules. We've only looked at here in terms of activities. We only really looked at module 1, pretty much the whole thing, and then we did 2 activities just in 5 and 8. So you can see how much content there is here and how much there is to explore and maybe start doing in your classrooms. The last thing that I wanted to say was that I think this is a great resource, but I think I think it's a good resource, but I think what's going to make it great is how teachers end up using this in their classrooms and the different ways they find to integrate this, especially that it should be accessible to everyone at this point.